Lesson 16, Flow Control. In this lesson, you will learn about the conditional and looping constructs that allow you to control the flow of a PHP script. We'll look at two types of flow control: conditional statements, which tell your script to execute a section of code only if certain criteria are met, and loops, which indicate a block of code that is to be repeated a number of times. Conditional statements tell your script to execute a section of code only if certain criteria are met. Within PHP, a conditional statement begins with the keyword if, followed by a condition in parentheses. Our example checks whether the value of the variable number is less than 10, and the echo statement displays its message only if that is the case. The condition property is satisfied if the value on the left of the less than symbol is smaller than the value on the right. If this condition is met, then the code in the following set of braces will be executed. If not, the script will jump to the next statement after the closing brace. That being said, this example will be true because 5 is less than 10, so the statement in the braces is executed and the corresponding output is displayed. So, we already know that braces are used in PHP to group blocks of code together. In a conditional statement, they surround the section of code that is to be executed if the preceding condition is true. Braces are not required after an if statement. If they are omitted, the following single statement is executed if the condition is true. Any subsequent statements are executed regardless of the status of the conditional. With PHP, you can perform a number of different comparisons in order to check for the equality or relative size of two values. This is the list of PHP's conditional operators. Don't worry, you'll be able to access this list in the lab section. For now, let's move on. There are also logical operators which combine multiple expressions to check two or more criteria in a single conditional statement. Here is how a statement would look if you wanted to check whether the value of a number is between 5 and 10. In this example, the keyword AND is a logical operator, which means that the overall condition will be true only if the expressions on either side are true. In this case, the number has to be both greater than or equal to 5 and less than or equal to 10. Here's a list of logical operators that can be used in PHP. Notice that this table shows two different ways of performing a logical AND or OR in PHP. The difference is mainly in the precedence used to evaluate expressions. This table shows the highest precedence operators first. Take a look at these conditions. In the first condition, the AND takes precedence and is evaluated first. So the overall condition is true if A is true or if both B and C are true. In the second condition, the parallel symbols take precedence, which means C must be true, as must either A or B to satisfy the condition. When a condition is not met, multiple condition branches can be used. This works by using an else clause with an if statement to specify an alternate action to be taken. This example tests the value of the number and displays a message that says whether it is greater than or less than 10. So basically, an else clause provides an either-or mechanism for conditional statements. If you want to add even more branches, you can use the else if keyword to add a further condition that is checked only if the previous condition in the statement fails. Let's look at an example. This one uses the date function to find the current time of day. The date, or H, gives a number between 0 and 23 that represents the hour on the clock and displays an appropriate greeting. This code displays good morning if the server time is between midnight and 11:59, good afternoon from midday to 4:59 p.m., and good evening from 5 p.m. onward. The else if condition only checks that the hour is less than 17. It does not need to check that the value is between 12 and 17 because the initial if condition ensures that PHP will not get as far as the else if the hour is less than 12. The code in the else clause is carried out if all else fails. For values where the hour is 17 or higher, neither the if nor the else if condition will be true. An if statement can contain as many else-if clauses as you need, but keep in mind that including too many clauses can often create a very cumbersome code. Luckily, an alternative is available, which is called the switch statement. Switch is a conditional statement that can have multiple branches in a much more compact format. Here, our example shows how you can use a switch statement to check a name against two lists to see whether it belongs to a friend. Each of these case statements defines a value for which the next block of PHP code will be executed. If you assign your first name as the name variable and run this script, you will be greeted as a friend if your name is Damon or Shelley, or you will be told you are not a friend if your name is Adolf or Saddam. If you have any other name, the script will tell you that it does not know who you are. Really, there can be any number of case statements that could precede the PHP code to which they relate. If the value that is being tested by the switch statement matches any one of them, any subsequent PHP code will be executed until a break command is reached. Any other value for the name variable in this case will cause the default code block to be executed. Just as with an else clause, default is optional and supplies an action to be taken if nothing else is appropriate. Okay, we've talked a whole lot about conditional statements. Now we need to spend some time learning about loops. PHP offers three types of loop constructs that all do the same thing. They're called the while loop, the do loop, and the for loop. Each repeats a section of code a number of times, but all work in a slightly different way. The while keyword takes a condition in parentheses, and the code block that follows is repeated while that condition remains true. If the condition is untrue to begin with, then the code block will not be repeated at all. Our example uses a while loop to display the square numbers from 1 to 10. The counter variable is initialized with a value of 1. The while loop calculates the square of that number and displays it, then adds 1 to the value. The operator adds 1 to the value of the variable that precedes it. The loop repeats while the condition is still true, which in this case means that the first 10 numbers and their squares are displayed in turn, and then the loop ends. The do loop is very similar to the while loop, except that the condition comes after the block of repeating code. Because of this variation, the loop code is always executed at least once, even if the condition is at first untrue. The do loop shown here is equivalent to the while loop, displaying the numbers from 1 to 10 with their squares. The for loop is the most compact way to create a loop. The following example again performs the same loop as the previous two examples. Obviously, using the for loop allows you to use much less code to do the same thing we did with the while loop and the do loops. A for statement has three parts which are separated by semicolons. The first part is an expression that is evaluated once when the loop begins. The second part is the condition. As long as the condition is true, the loop continues repeating. The third part is an expression that is evaluated once at the end of each pass of the loop. So far, we have only really covered very simple examples of conditions and loops. It's worth mentioning that it is also possible to nest these constructs within each other to create some really complex rules to control the flow of a script. You know about using the keyword break in a switch statement, but you can also use break in a loop construct to tell PHP to immediately exit the loop and continue with the rest of the script. You can also use the continue keyword to end the current pass of a loop, but unlike with break, the script will jump back to the top of the loop and continue execution until the loop condition fails. In this lesson, you have learned how to vary the flow of your PHP script by using conditional statements and loops. You can now test your knowledge in the quiz area, access the scripts we learned in the lab, or go through the lesson again. The choice is yours. Thank you for choosing Sam's Teach Yourself.